Yeah.
All right. Let's share. Yes, okay. Can I share screen?
I think someone on the select teams, take a little quest. Yeah.
All right. If you're watching,
My name is.
can I?
And you are watching Disney Channel.
We are not watching the Disney Channel. We are watching VGDC, which may be better or may not be better. Wait, did we share the? Did we share the Zoom link?
Oh, no.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. Wait, hold on. I was sharing VGDC secrets. The restream. Oh no. Oh no. I mean, if you really care about it, we can just crop this whole thing out there.
It's all good.
All right, Jackie, I'm gonna use your account to share the Zoom link. Where is this? Why is this moderate? Why is this yellow?
And I was like still finishing on play, that's why. Oh shit, I didn't upload it. But I'm still finishing
Everything up.
What was it called again?
Yeah, I workshop. Here's the Zoom link for the guest speaker workshop. You can tell that is not her.
Not my right.
That is not her.
Oh, Robbie, feel free to sit on that chair. More comfortable.
Yes.
This is such a cool. Thank you. We recently like cleaned we're like in the process of remodeling it. It's like getting renovation.
Yeah.
All right, this should be set up for you now.
Instead of advanced, would it just be an aspect? Great.
What?
Advanced is just an aspect? Or?
Yeah, just use the
Okay,
keyboard.
Yeah. You can just like press the space bar.
We can also turn on the fan if you want. I mean, this room has no air conditioning.
Yeah, apologies.
Oh, yeah.
It should be streamed. It should be.
It's like it's screen sharing.
Okay. Yeah, because we upload these recordings also for our YouTube folks.
I cannot see the top of this. Yeah, it's
I think it's going. Okay.
my bad.
We got a participant.
So, everyone, we're gonna get started with the workshop now. So, if you can go ahead and present yourself, then.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Angell. I am a game narrative, largely game writer, working in narrative design a little bit too. And I'm also interested in regular game design, but professionally, I've mostly just done narrative stuff. So yeah, real quick, I know there's a lot of bullet points, but I'll go through them real fast. So we're a very small town in Massachusetts called Sherburne. Most people have not heard of it. I've been a gamer my entire life. I went from a small town to a smaller town for college, where I studied film. It's called Kenyon in Ohio. I moved to LA when I graduated in 2015, and the goal there was sort of just writing specifically for film. My degree was largely in screenwriting. Things like that, but I also produce a bit of theater. So once I've been out here writing, I like any medium. So I'm writing short plays, I'm writing short films, I'm writing short stories, lots of short media. And then in 2019, I joined an indie game studio called Turning Up Games, which I'm going to be talking about a little bit more. I've been worked there until 2023. I was unfortunately laid off late last year. But that allowed me to go to GDC in 2024, where I was a conference associate, which I'll talk a lot about. I'm a big fan of that program. And I'm currently freelance. I'm working on games, I'm working on short stories, scripts, a lot more, comics too. Studio life. Hopefully your studio does not look like that. It is there to remind you that, like, you know, for some people it's a shock, is that like studios are often run like offices. They are technically kind of offices. We would use the term office and studio interchangeably. There were no cubicles at mine, which was nice, a much more open plan. But Turn Me Up Games is based in Burbank, California. They're sort of between indie and AAA. There's a term of AA emerging among studios like that. There are about 30 employees. I worked on, it was small enough that the narrative department was 1 to 2 people while I was working there. And it was pretty common to have very small departments like that, especially for the ones that, you know, did not require a lot of programming and things like that. We mostly were like porting games, but I was working on one of their first original IPs, which I don't think I can talk about too much because it has not been announced. But there's a lot of spaces that are doing things like that. It's interesting to see, you know, a lot of the jobs I'm applying for right now are sort of studios that have done one thing and now they're looking to make their own original IP. So there are some opportunities out there for those of us in game narrative. It can look a little scary when you go on LinkedIn and don't see too much, but they are there. They're hiding. I think one of the biggest things that I learned there was learning about the other disciplines. You know, I came to this from the world of film, which there are some crossovers, especially, you know, for writing cutscenes. It's basically just animation writing. But it was a bit of a culture shock to sort of be, you know, moved into this space where just the role of the story is a little bit different. The way I like to think about it is that on a film, the narrative is the script is the backbone, and then everything else kind of builds onto that. With a game, I feel like it's usually the game design is that backbone, and then the story, depending on how narratively intense the game can be, like that will sort of be, you know, it's another sort of feature of it, sort of like the acting or the props of the art is on a film. So that was definitely an interesting change. The game I was working on mostly was very narrative focused, so we actually were sort of absorbed into the design department for most of the time that I was there. And it was good because it was basically a crash course for me in game design, and because I, you know, did not have really a background in it. And it was also, you know, a lot of things that I learned just about communication between disciplines is always very hard. And even though it seems easy, even when it's, you know, your friends you're talking to, like, it's crucial to set up those channels to communicate. But I had that issue with the audio department as well. You know, there's a great GDC talk from this year about the narrative to audio pipeline called Casting Light on the Black Box. It's all about just how hard it can be for a voice actor to understand where they are in this, you know, world. And so I opened up, you know, a Slack channel with our VA director, just so he could say, hey, we have no idea what the context of this line is. And he'd be like, oh, totally, like, we got you. Like, it's that crucial. Small things like that are crucial to helping that thing. And when we were initially starting, you know, we were in what we've called the narrative cave.
Yeah, so what did was there any hiccups when you were like transitioning your film writing skills into like the gaming industry? Because I feel like that there's like some jarring like kind of changes that you experienced.
There were. The fact that you're in this club is probably helping you encounter some of those early. But I remember when I was first hired, we were working on a client's game, and they were having us. They wanted me to sort of, you know, take a scene and revise it a little bit. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And I go revise it. I'm like, yeah, just whatever was, you know, the best story. And then I give it to the narrative director, and he goes, I love your writing. I love what you got here. we can't add any new animations to this sequence. So like, again, what you wrote was great, but you go back again, and this time, without anything that is, requires the animation, that was a big thing for me to learn, because usually, and that happens in film too, sometimes, like you'll have to do a rewrite when they are doing reshoots, but usually, you sort of are able to live in that blue sky world, and then everyone else has to solve the problems, which is the other thing to be very wary about. On the project I'm working on now, I'm trying to constantly check in and be like, okay, like, this is possible, what we've written, right? Like, that's not going to be weeks of your life, right? Just to make this one thing. I've noticed that there's a tendency for other disciplines to see something in a narrative document or in a script and to treat it as if it's been carved in cement. When we are actually the department that can iterate the quickest, we don't have to wait for things to render. We don't have to, do any complicated coding. We're able to, usually, in terms of this core story and the writing of it, we're able to change that faster than any other department. And, it requires us to be a little bit more proactive to find those moments, because not everyone is going to do that. And you never know how your words are going to be perceived. You say like, she reaches into her handbag and pulls out a tube of lipstick, and the entire studio might go berserk. The animators are like, we don't have an animation for that. They're like, wait, we need two different things coming out together. And that gets back to the narrative person, like, oh, we could have rewritten that a month ago. So it's a good idea to learn the other disciplines. Some of you may already be doing this. There were times when I was able to sort of make a suggestion to the design department that ended up being a direction that we took. It was, one moment where it was kind of based on a misunderstanding I had, where I thought that the goal was to make a very non-linear open world game, and they had been kind of making this linear experience. And I said that, like, it didn't really feel good, and we made a huge shift to sort of change that into a more open world experience. So yeah, it's be careful what you say sometimes, because like, I think it was a good idea because it was needed for the game to be more fun. But that was the next couple months of our life was changing these things up. And even, by the time I left the studio, we were still catching things that were legacy problems from that. At a small studio, like a AA or an indie studio, you're also going to wear a lot of hats. If you do know other disciplines, it's very helpful, even if it's just a little bit, partly because you're able to communicate better with the people who you're working with, and also because you may be asked to, pitch ideas or to think of things, that are also, again, in scope and budget. And the more you know about how the other departments work, the better you'll be at doing that. So if you can learn other sides of the industry, GDC is great for that. I had some questions from your officers about, just sort of the writing process, what's the same and what's different. There's a lot from like, traditional prose writing, film, screenwriting that is similar. It really does depend on the studio where you are. I've written in Excel documents. I've written things out in Final Draft. I've written things in Angell. Our engineers actually made a narrative solution that was way better than the one we were using before. That could work directly in Unreal, which was really cool. We change it and then boom, that's what the subtitle was now. To me, the core of it is very much the same. You're still developing characters, you're still giving them arcs, you're still figuring out your plots. The timing can be weird because we, unlike every other discipline, we give the players so much control over pacing and just what happens. It's, you can do a game on rails, and there are many that are very fun, but unless you are doing that, you're probably working in a very strange place in terms of the pace of the story and just the way that is going to be told, because you have that huge X factor of what's the player going to do in this moment, and making sure that it's very fun for all of the players, and no matter what they choose, that they have a good experience. That's a whole other wrinkle to it. But I've compared it to every other type of writing I've done, where it's like normally you figure out, okay, yeah, this is the decision this character makes, this is what happens, this is the best option, for the story. Blah, blah, blah. With the game, you usually have to do 2 to 3 more things at that exact moment that also are just as good, because in a lot of games, there's a lot of choice given up to the player. And the other ones, I'm very conscious that some of the ones, especially the ones where I'm writing in Excel, programmers love it when you write in Excel. I'm just writing barks for characters, and like people may have the volume all the way down. People are probably going to be just like tapping through this section. It's crucial to sort of, I think, check your ego when you're working in games. It isn't any discipline, but I think particularly in games for writers, just because I sat down to play a new Kirby game with my nephew, and he's just going through all the cutscenes. I was like, should we watch one? This is, the thing I do, buddy. But yeah. The other big difference that I had was, when I switched from, I had a day job as a Starbucks barista, and switching from that to writing full time in the studio, I kind of had to cut a little bit of the fluff from my rituals. Like I used to, have a very sacred, like, this is my writing time. I will like put on this playlist. I will have, this exact drink. I would usually do dirty chais while facing the blank page, and green tea lattes when I was revising. And I kind of threw all of that, not all of it entirely, but like most of it out the window, because I'm at a studio now. I'm sitting there for 8 hours. That is my designated writing time. And I just need to make sure that I'm hitting these things that are needed by the rest of the team. And I didn't really have time for, to have writer's block. I got very practiced at just writing anything, even if it's not great. This is especially nice if you have at least one other person in the department to sort of be like, hey, I got something. It's not great, but what do you think? And they can sometimes be that reality check of like, honestly, this is fine. Or, they can also use that to jump off of. I love the collaborative aspects of this industry. And, you can also get that from outside the department too, but it's nice to have someone who speaks your language and kind of knows what you're talking about. It talked a little bit with your officers about other media, and like if you have a background in other media, is that a downside? Can it be a good side? I think it is absolutely a good side, a tough side. As long as you acknowledge that this is going to be very different, it's helpful to have just any fresh background, whatever you are bringing to a team, that is your unique perspective and your unique experience. I told the officers about when I was in a playwriting class, and it's my senior year, I had picked my major. Everyone knew I was in film, and the note I would constantly get from this professor was that my plays were too cinematic. And I did not know what that meant exactly. I tried to address it, and I felt like it might have just been because I was in film, that was just what I was always getting. But I also looked at it, I was like, what's wrong with that? Like, there's a lot of things that cinema can apply to theater that, as long as you know both very well and you are intentional about what you're doing and the rules you're breaking, right? It can be a very good thing. Like, it's kind of neat when you can take a feeling that you can only get in one medium and kind of reproduce it in another one. I was thinking a lot about how games are one of the few mediums where when you talk about it, you don't say, oh, Joel protected Ellie, however you say it. I protected Ellie. You use the first person when you talk about what you did in a game. And this is the big kicker, the one that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. It's on my mind right now because I still very freelance, but how do you get that job? I've had a couple of revelations since landing that job. The one is that I have completely changed my tune on cover letters. I used to hate them so much. And on a level I do still kind of, but I started to look at them not so much as like these very boring, bland documents. Like, they are a story, they are your story, and the next act of that story is you getting hired and working at this company. So just the tone of my cover letters is super different now. Like, I try to basically use that as the pre-interview step to be like, hey, this is how you can get to know me. So there may be a little less formal these days than most people would expect. You still do need to be business-like and professional, but I feel like there's a lot to be said for breaking out of some of those boxes and really just letting who you are shine in your novel letters and things like that. And all of us are good at writing stories, so maybe your strengths, right? In terms of like previous work, I was just using this yesterday. Some of the best advice I ever got was given by my dad. He's not a writer, he's an accountant, but he had great advice. When I was just starting out, I put the word aspiring before writer every time. And he was like, you gotta drop that aspiring. He's like, you've been writing since you were 11. Like, not good stuff necessarily, but you've been writing and you are a writer. And don't say aspiring just because, you know, the world's gonna give you a lot of reasons why you shouldn't be doing this. And it's your job to be like, no, and not give them those things already. Like, all of you, by being here, by being in this club, by coming to this stuff, you are not aspiring writers, you are writers, you are game devs. That is, it took me a long time to own the label of game dev just because I felt very much outside of it. But yeah, definitely no aspiring. I'm even iffy on the word emerging. It's a little bit better, but I say go ahead and just say, yep, that's what I do. I really doubled down with a tattoo and everything. Your games experience, even if you have no experience in the industry. I played up the fact that I was DMing a D&D game when I was in my interview. I said to my parents, I think I got a job and I know I got someone to play D&D with. And that is crucial. Anything that is, you know, you can draw on to say, I know how games work. Like, you don't have to do that extra step of training with me. Yeah, that is very helpful, even if it has not been like work with a company specifically. Like, I'm sure you've been playing games for a long time. I'm sure that you've probably made some games too, you know, like definitely play those up as well. And even things that, you know, might not be related specifically to video games, like most video games are just, you know, TTRPGs with extra steps. So showing that you have that core knowledge can, you know, be, as long as you're creative with, you know, your resume and your past, I think that'll really serve you. Game Developers Conference was, I was there in March. That's actually why I'm here today, because I had met some students on the last day and we stayed in touch, and I'm really grateful for that, because I'm also developing one of the games I'm working on now with some students from ACI as well. So it opens for applications in October, and to me it is the ideal way to experience the conference. I know a friend of mine said, like, I kind of don't want to go like to work there, like I want to go as a attendee. But the thing is that a lot of the CAs are people who own their own companies. They are, there's runs the gamut from, you know, students to people who are fairly big names in the industry. Like, yeah, I had two mentors who went over, you know, the basics of portfolios with me. And, you know, high-level narrative designers and narrative writers at these companies. So, and you have all this time to just network with those people and make those connections and play games with those people, which is, I'm going to get to networking in a minute. But to me, that I feel like I would have had a harder time if I just went to the thing, you know, as a regular attendee. This sort of gave a built-in group of people to network with, group of people to talk to support you, to sort of guide you through the process. It also comes with GDC Vault access for a year, which is great. I don't know if the school has a license or anything like that, but some studios have membership. The first GDC videos I watched were at my old studio. And there are a couple of videos that are out on YouTube. They'll basically release them a couple of years after it happens. And that was sort of my video game college, was watching those videos, Game Maker's Toolkit. There are a lot of resources these days for someone looking to learn aspects of the thing. And then, you know, I would always bring those to the people I was working with, be like, hey, I just learned about this new technique for narrative design. Can this help us at all? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is that it helps you a lot. Like, that's what I found. There are other ways to get passes as well. I know there are contests held on LinkedIn. It's not the best pass, but there's like a Friday only expo pass that can at least get you there, and it doesn't get you into many talks or roundtables or things like that, but there are some that it can get you in, and, you know, especially if you're good at networking, which I think is on the next slide. You can leverage it. Yeah, networking. That word used to scare the hell out of me so much. I consider myself an introvert. I definitely gain energy from being alone or in a small group. Still a theater kid, so that's weird. I don't know, but I learned shortly after I got this last job, I went to a networking event that was mostly just because my friends were organizing it and I wanted to see them. And I was like, oh, it's just making friends, which I've been historically pretty decent at. So, and I assume, you know, most of us here hopefully have friends and have made friends. And that to me just was a huge weight off my shoulders, because I found that, like, you know, I was kind of annoyed by the people who were very overbearing and like, I'm going to win this networking event, you know. And I connected much more with the people who were a little bit more relaxed. And then, you know, they were like, hey, how are you? Like, getting to know you first is great. And the business cards I've passed around have been after the ends of those types of conversations. There are a couple of people, you know, who you can talk with, you know, obviously alumni. I know I have a lot of friends who went to UCI. So this is an interesting experience for me because I've heard so much about the campus, but I haven't actually been here before. There are writers' meetups all the time. Those can sometimes take a little bit of digging to find, but either through your network or through sites like LinkedIn, sites like Meetup, so you can find those. Specifically game dev ones, you know, those writers, those game devs. Something like GDC again, even if you are going with a small pass, like, you never know who you're going to bump into, you know, in the hall. You know, I would have conversations. It started, you know, in one of the rooms, but then would sort of continue. And I personally am very big on introducing people who I think would be good to know each other. And I think that that's nice, because then you have two people who are hopefully grateful that you made this introduction, and remember that when they're looking for someone to write for their projects. And then, yeah, just tell people that you're doing this, that you're making games, share your games with people. I played a really good student game that I happened to run into this guy while I was looking for my cousin at, you know, a party, and then ran into him again. And when I got home, I, you know, had his business card, played his game, and then posted about it, and now I'm connected with the whole dev team. So I told them, you know, that if you want someone to punch up this story, and like, I got you. So yeah, I keep thinking, you know, as I'm taking longer than I hoped to for finding another like, steady studio job, that you really just need one. And so it's very much a numbers game. My grandfather would say, shots on goal, which is a sports reference, which is not my forte, but I understood it anyway. This is just a word of advice that I got from the student art designers at GDC for the structure of a portfolio, because I've had samples, you know, I've done plenty of writing. That's a crucial thing, right? Is to actually have evidence that you are a good writer when people, you know, need it. Definitely don't prioritize other things over actually doing the work. They suggested having some form of playable game. This is the best time that there ever has been to make your own game. I'm learning some of these, you know, myself, but like Twine, itch.io, NumPy, all fairly like low barriers of entry to sort of figure out the basics and even to master some of those. You may be doing some of these already, just by nature of being in the club. But also keeping that short is a good idea. I saw no one wants to read 10 pages is a lot. So, like, no one wants to read more than that for sure. And, you know, if you're able to do things, you know, in a more concise manner, that's really helpful for a job search. Very concise for barks. They're also pretty hard to do, especially when you don't have the context, you know, given to you by a designer or something. But demonstrating that you're able to write interesting lines that don't fully detract from the main thing, but it can also be informative. Very delicate balance to navigate, but I think that the advice I got was sort of do like maybe 3 different characters and give like 3 barks for each of them or something like that. Same thing with item descriptions. The advice I got was to take, you know, magic item or a location in your the D&D campaign I'm working on right now, and to just sort of write something like that, show that you can tell the story just in those little small one sentence snippets, that you can connect things to each other. You know, it's probably not like the crown jewel, but it's a good thing to have there. And I'm thinking, you know, non-game materials. We've got a lot of short stories. We've got a lot of scripts. And I'd love to put them together. In fact, one of the things that my first supervisor told me was that, apart from the other candidate they were considering, was a script for a theatrical drinking game that I wrote for free, just to, as a, not even a favor, just like the thing that my friend was putting up. So, you know, I never expected that to go anywhere, but I was like, this is pretty fun, this is pretty good. I'll throw that in this, you know, they need samples, I'll throw that in there. And it resonated with me, so, you know, tailoring, you know, what you're doing to where you're working also is very helpful. And it's a good idea to only have not too many of this. Like, you don't want this to be the core of your thing. You want it, your portfolio, you want it to show that you are aware of how games work and that you can write in them, but also give a bit of an introduction, especially if you're showing a shorter piece of a longer work. Be like, here's why this is in this portfolio. This is demonstrating my ability to develop characters. So this is showing my ability to write dialogue. That just helps them know, like, okay, why am I looking at this? What's the reason that this webcomic, for example, is like in this document? And it should be definitely, in general, your portfolio should be your best work, but especially for the stuff that's not actually game related. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
And I'm sorry if this is gonna get like real for a second, but like could you say like why you weren't comfortable with like calling yourself like a writer, even though you yourself like knew you like were good at writing,
Yeah.
but like why did you struggle with accepting?
Well, I haven't ever really struggled with the label of writer. The reason I put aspiring before it was that I just felt like I don't have, you know, I read like a poem on local TV once. Like, I was like published, but like by my college, like, you know, that didn't feel like it was real, but it is. And I struggled much more with game dev, partly because, you know, I didn't have the education in it, and almost everyone else at my studio did. I sort of overcame that just through educating myself and through getting that experience. Yeah.
I call myself a programmer and I call myself a free software developer.
Yeah.
But I've had talks to my dad before where he said, if you don't, as long as you don't have a degree, you don't claim as a programmer. But my dad's a civil engineer. When you're a civil engineer, you need certifications to practice civil engineering. It's like the bar exam is not like that. You can be an aspiring lawyer, then you take the bar exam, and then you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
But software engineering is different, and also voice acting is different as well.
Yeah.
So I've also seen people on the Roblox developer forums call themselves aspiring game developers, and I ask myself, were they doing this for like 1 year or like 5 months? You said you've been doing this since 2011, so aspiring does not suit you anymore.
Yes.
Did it suit you for like 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, are you programming at any point in your life? Then you're officially a programmer. And obviously, you know, certain things have certifications. You can't, you know, put a band-aid on and call yourself a doctor. But for things like writers and game devs, all you really have to be doing is the work, and then that's what you are. Yeah, good questions. Thanks.
I love it.
I have to see what I'm back.
Okay.
Alright, so sorry if I like missed this, but how much, I mean, how much of your time as a writer would you say that like you spent like on creative writing? Like, was it mostly about like dialogue, where you're like working more on like, you know, like designing narrative, like quest design,
Yeah,
item descriptions, or
it's a really good question. I think it's gonna depend on what studio you work at. I did a lot of everything. We didn't really have item descriptions in our game, but we did have, you know, one section where we were writing barks for like a Pirates game. Yeah, I mean that's the other things, you know, you're not gonna be spending all of that 8 hours just like doing all of it's fun if you look at it a certain way, but like the fun part, right, of just creative writing and drafting things, like there's a lot that is going to go into revisions. You need to be applying feedback. In order to communicate the game and your story to the team, you're going to need to generate documents that they can understand. So you're going to need to doing a lot of outlining. I'm a big proponent of outlining. Used to hate it, and that's crucial to me just because otherwise I feel lost without a proper outline these days. And there's a lot of different ways to outline things. So if you don't like one method, definitely switch to another one. And throwing that into games also changes things up a lot too. I'm a big fan of Alexander Sword's Forest Paths method for narrative design. It's working pretty well so far on the project I'm on. And it's very good for that initial sort of high level, like introducing what this game is to your team, especially as the story relates to all the things that they're going to be working on. Because yeah, you're going to get your producers, you're going to get your executives who want to know what they're investing in before you ever actually get to start writing anything. And you need to be on board with your team so that if there's more than one writer, you can write in the same voice. You need to know all the limitations that you've got. So there's definitely a lot of preamble, and that would definitely be most of the work. 70, I'm bad with numbers, that's why I've been writing, but like maybe 70 to 80% is sort of, working with other departments, getting on the same page, outlining, revising, and then there is that moment, and you gotta cherish it when it comes because it's always nice and always feels great. Where you are sort of doing that generative creative writing, and so that's it.
From what I've observed in previous, you said previously, like the lipstick example, I've noticed that most of your writing tends to take place with like realistic stories or like realistic fiction. Did you ever write, attempting to answer any philosophical questions? I'm talking about like actual philosophical quandaries where you had to write about. Would you have any experience in that position?
Yeah. For me personally, my themes tend to emerge after the fact. I'll just feel like I'm a very intuitive writer, so I will feel a strong pull towards something. I don't always understand why, but I'm like, I really want to write about this, so here it is. And that's where I love that collaborative aspect and conversations with your team. It's another part of writing that I've learned to love quite a bit. A producer will ask me, why is this? Or like, why are you so I had a piece of feedback from a friend of mine on a short story I was writing, and it did not gel with me, and I understood why he said it. And I was like, something about this is weird. And I had to ask myself, like, why does this feel weird? What am I really like grabbing onto that I don't want to let go of? And how can I address the problem that he rightly pointed out in his feedback without losing that thing that I'm very, very protective of? It can be hard to, to communicate that to a team. Like I was trying to have references to Dante's Purgatorio in this game, and I got a couple of them in there, but it was hard for people who are not as literary maybe to jump on board to that idea. If you're not able to communicate that, that's another reason to learn the way that the people are thinking in your company and your studio, and learn how to present your ideas in a way that will make sense.
Yeah, it was like similar to that. I know that, as a writer, of course, like you have to talk with like all of the departments, but which department in specific do you find yourself talking to more? And was that surprising to you that it was that?
That's a really good question. I definitely spend the most time talking to the design department because I was in all of their meetings, especially once they merged the departments. I think that might not always be the case if you're working on like, something like Mario Kart, where the narrative and the design are not super tied together. They do need to, inform each other, right? And that's what makes those nice resonant moments. But even if you're on like a choice-based game or something like Baldur's Gate, like you're going to be working much more with the designers. You definitely will be working with audio, especially if there's voice lines in the game. And you'll be working a lot with animation because what they're able to do limits kind of the scope of what you can write. There's a lot of ways I love limitations so much because that's kind of where the real creative stuff that makes me feel very smart when it comes into play. Because it's like, okay, I have this very broad, big idea, and we physically cannot do it. So how do we pivot from that? And it's in that moment when, we're putting our heads together, we're brainstorming, that the most brilliant ideas come out in my experience. And so I am very welcoming of limitations. I beg my team for them as early and often as I can get them, just because it makes things easier for them, which is nice. Again, you want to avoid that cave, narrative cave. And yeah, it's definitely crucial to anything, I think, is perspective on it, and having a positive and healthy perspective on the things that will set you back, the setbacks that definitely will happen, and seeing them more as opportunities than as like something that is grinding you to a halt. It's pretty crucial for a career in the arts period.
It's also related to that. So for writing screenplays, it's like easier for voice actors to like look at that and be like, oh, okay, let me read through this and understand what's going on at the very moment, so they can like be able to deliver the line better. But like you said, sometimes you write on Excel or sometimes you write on like a different platform. So in those cases, how do you find you can help out voice actors better deliver the line?
It's a good question. Yeah, that's one of the drawbacks to games being as relatively young as it is in the scheme of art, is that there's a lot of things that we still haven't kind of formalized or figured out, and a lot of voice actors will receive just their lines and like that's it. And I think that's why it's important to be in conversation with your team, to keep them, like, your audio lead should know everything on a high level about the story and about the content, so that they don't have to go to you. We were in a small company, so again, we kind of willingly put that hat on. But it's it also really depends on the voice actor. Like, we got to learn, what our main actor, things that like threw him for a weird loop. Like, he did not like if you put quotes in some, he would sort of just assume that was like supposed to be said in someone else's voice. So we're like, okay, like no more putting things in quotes, at least not in the version that we sent to him, And that's comes from that. I learned all these little things just by talking to our audio folks and saying like, oh, yeah, we keep noticing this, like, what's this, why is that happening? And they'll come back and tell you like, oh yeah, like he sees that, like this punctuation, even sometimes it could be, which can be tough to adjust what you're doing, but he reads dashes this way and ellipses this way. Like, getting to know your voice actors. I tried to, when they were in the office, swing by when they were on a break and be like, oh, I'm the one making your life hell right now. And so it really happens. And it does kind of depend on your team and the experience that those voice actors are bringing in and that the audio folks are bringing in, because some of those things can be cleared up by the person directing them. Some of those things can't. But I think one of the big lessons I learned from that company, where we sort of all went from working in arcades to eventually sort of talking to each other. The fear there was that people would get attached to things that were kind of work in progress or temporary, but that didn't really become a problem for us. We definitely had more problems with keeping everyone in the dark about what everyone else was doing. It just, there was good work being done, but it wasn't resonating with any of the rest of the work that was being done. That's also a way that the forest paths method can help. It's built to track and identify the resonance across various aspects of the game. Earlier you mentioned you had trouble with writing stuff, that's right, but on things out of it. So where do you look for inspiration to combat that, and other things that you do besides like maybe getting a dirty job? I mean, that helps. Something about caffeine just kind of gets your brain going, but I noticed that when I'm doing something hyper logical, it lets the creative side of my mind just kind of work in the background. And so I would play chess with myself. I have a little travel chess set that I would keep on my desk. And if I was like really stumped by the white page, I would just start playing, this chess game against myself. It usually took 2 to 3 moves for me to have something that I could put on there. I think the easiest way to cure writer's block is to just write anything. Like you have to stop worrying about if it's good or not. Like that's pre-editing yourself is kind of like the enemy of getting the actually good stuff out. I feel like there's a big problem with people like focusing on the product and not on the process. And if you can like find people like talking about their processes and look at something that you love while it was in progress. I know I guess Lin-Manuel Miranda put out his journals for writing Hamilton. The early drafts are bad. It's like he had to do that. He had to show that to people to be like, hey, I don't think this word is working, buddy. For that to be the Tony Award-winning musical that it became. So yeah, if you can like find examples of that happening, that's very helpful to me at least. And you're like, oh, okay, like, this doesn't just spring like Athena from the head of Zeus. Like this takes work, this takes effort, this takes drafts, and that makes me more comfortable. Sharing a bad draft, especially with another narrative person, but even with someone from another department, and saying like, I'll preface it with, I know this doesn't work, but here's what we've got. Does this spark anything for you? I saw a hand.
Yeah. So I had a question about like if there's like any sort of like recreational activities you can maybe like recommend to kind of help with getting your mind into like that writer workflow like mindset.
Recreational activities getting the writer mindset. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm just
like for example, for my case, usually what I like to do is maybe just go biking for like a little bit before I actually go into like the writer mode or like just whatever I need to do for like any sort of game development that I need to do for that day. Is there anything that you like do on your time? Okay.
I don't really. I mean, part of it for me for a long time was like getting out of my apartment. I would write in cafes. That can get expensive if you're not careful. Or even like going to a friend's apartment and writing there can help. I have a friend who we had a really great session where we had 2-hour blocks where we would just work, and then we'd have like 15-30 minute breaks in between to just chat. We could talk about what we were writing, or we could just talk about literally anything else. I think a big part of that is sort of finding what works for you. I know blocks are helpful in me out. Actually, if they do it, I don't do them enough, but they are very helpful for just like thinking in general, especially if you can leave your phone behind, or at least not look at it. It's hard to be bored. I feel like in the modern era, there's always something blinking or flashing or making sounds to get your attention. But for me, like boredom is crucial because that's where a lot of your creativity just kicks right in when you get bored. Sometimes if I'm at home, I don't do this at work, right? But I'll take a shower because that's, I don't have my phone with me, right? And I had like, it's just repetitive sound and feeling of water going on you, and just like, it's a great place to think. So finding what works for you is crucial, and the way to do that is to try what other people suggest, and if it doesn't work for you, don't do it anymore. I get very upset when I hear people talking about any absolutes, like, oh, you have to do it. Like the common one is you have to write every single day to be a good writer. I know Stephen King does that, and it works very well for him, obviously. But that has never worked well for me, partly because I don't think I've ever been too afraid of the blank page. I never have that issue of not being able to overcome, that hurdle. I'm able to just get the bad stuff on the page. But I can definitely see how it helps and how it works, like any time you spend writing is going to be helping you. But I think also, especially as writers, if we don't want, this is not meant to be a dig at King, but it kind of is. If we don't want our only characters to like be other writers or to be only writing stories about writing or about writers, we need to go out and experience the world and live in it. And that's where we get our inspiration from, and that's where we get our uniqueness from.
You mentioned like pacing, especially within a game narrative, can be kind of tricky. And I've kind of felt that too with my own game development, where like you write it like something on a script, and then when it transitions to the scene, not all the story beats or the emotions you're trying to tell like carry over.
Yeah.
Especially if the player might like speed through that particular level, or like be kind of slow or too fast.
Yeah.
So do you have any like tips on how to like find that like before it gets onto like the game engine?
Yeah. It's probably gonna take just practice and doing it. Like, that's, I think if you can play as many games as you can to sort of see how other people are solving those problems, and watching Let's Plays too and stuff to see like how does somebody who's not me approach this problem, because you'll find that the devs usually have a solution for that. And talking to your other folks, I think that it's a good idea to like start slow, like make small prototypes and playtesting at pretty much every level. And play this for yourself, but also watch other people when they're playtesting and get other people's feedback when they're playtesting, because they will tell you when they feel bored. And that means maybe you are being a little too subtle with, the way that you're messaging something. They will tell you if something feels too fast. And yeah, you also don't want to put too much investment into building up the game before you start doing that. But so that's on the project I'm working on now. Like I'm building out, sort of prototypes of the game in Twine. We're going to be doing Runtime eventually, but there's to give an idea of like, okay, what does this actually feel like to play? And how is that going to feel? There's a GC talk that I tried to watch a couple times, and there's an audio problem that is annoying to my ADHD mind, but it's pretty good. I think it's sort of talking about making a board game for your team, and it's not exactly my skill set, so I don't know, how helpful that is necessarily, but like finding ways to make your game exist in some way in the real world and separate it from the page. I guess applying the same principle that you would if you're writing a theater play or a screenplay. Something that can be helpful is either getting a friend or just doing it yourself and speaking the dialogue out loud. It'll help you determine what doesn't sound right, and it also can help you determine if pacing is weird or if your word choice works better read than it does spoken. And I think it's the same principle there of trying to plan for as many things as you can within reason, but then also being flexible enough to change it when it does change, and finding inexpensive ways to sort of simulate that experience.
What do you like most about writing in general, not only just for games, but like
That's a great question. I kind of came to writing from acting, and I always have enjoyed that experience of portraying another person, and writing is kind of that times a million, because you're not only portraying all the people whose voices you need to represent, but you're also creating that world. And I like the feeling of being able to just create things and there's a painter who once said that like his favorite color is white because he can paint on it. And that very much resonates with me, because I like that, you know, there can be nothing, and then just with my fingers, I'm able to bring these things, it's literally magic. There's like a Bren, the magic system relies so much on words, because that is the closest thing we have to like fantasy magic, is the ability to say or put a symbol on a page and then conjure something up in someone else's mind, or, you know, that's why there's always an amazing moment when you've written something that's only exists in your head, and then you give it to your team. I am not particularly gifted at drawing, so when I see something that I've written drawn by someone who knows what they're doing, it's magical. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually got a couple.
Sure.
But I also wanted to say that rate, or what you said at the end was actually like it kind of resonates with me a lot. Just being able to transcribe like your thoughts and just have other people go, wow, I want to like make something out of this now. That's
Yeah.
such a good feeling, but like,
Yeah.
well described. I actually have two questions though. First one was, what is like your favorite movie that I feel like not a lot of people know about? And then the second one is, what is a movie that you just don't understand why it gets so much praise for?
So I don't think too much about other people's opinions when I make movies. And I also grapple with the concept of favorite, because I'm like, but I like them all so much. Let's see, maybe um, you come back to me. I might be able to get praise. Oh, there was not maybe I won the Oscar for sound mixing recently. If I notice the sound mixing, it probably means it's bad. But I forget what it is. I in general don't like award shows, just because again, to me, I can't even pick a favorite to tell you guys about, right? So you know, it's the concept is just weird to me. And I often feel like, you know, but yeah, American Fiction was my best picture. And I did see Oppenheimer, so I can say it with some authority. If you haven't seen American Fiction, it's fantastic. Especially for writers, it's all about writers. I know I was harking on Stephen King before, but I like stories about writers because I can resonate with them. Yeah, and my family resonated with that too, and most of them are writers too. So it's good. I like when the movie can mix like humor and very much not humor, and that was those.
When you typically write, do you typically have like a dark theme on your word processor?
Like in terms of like light thing versus dark thing.
Yeah, do you typically have white text on a like white background on black text, or white text on a black background?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
I hope that I'm not in the Asa light, but I am all about the dark theme.
Oh, but does that mean you typically have like a black canvas to write white text on?
Yes,
Then why is your favorite color black?
that's a great question. Yeah, that was an artist who I was quoting. I did not come down on any hard side for favorite color, but yes, my favorite color is whatever the page honestly is, or it's purple, as you can imagine. But that actually can cause problems too. Like I'm writing a webcomic right now, which I think is on that page. I'm actually very curious to hear college students' opinions on it, because it's been a while since I've been in college and it takes place once. But you know, I one of the things I want to do with that is I like the idea of using the font color to represent a different language. And so one of the languages we represented with a yellow font, and it's a color that looks perfect on that black background, not realizing that when I sent it to my team, it was showing up on a white background and you could not see the yellow text at all. So yeah, that's my lesson I learned about light theme versus dark theme, is know what your team is doing and make sure that they can read what you're working in.
And sorry, real quick, You guys have any like last questions? We're gonna like end the workshop here, so just keep that in mind. So
And definitely feel free to connect with me on any of these sites, yeah, email, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Yeah,
What was the name of that movie that you said you liked about writers?
American Fiction.
What's your favorite trope to like read, and then what's your favorite trope to write?
My short story that I'm working on right now, I published at the end of it, like an excerpt last year, and I'm expanding it. What I had to cut from the excerpt basically was this like enemies to lovers story, which I had not really written it before, and I love it so much. It's just it's so juicy, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, I'm like, it's the hard part right now is like I kind of want to just keep going back and forth with this forever. Which is weird because I've already written the end of it. So I'm like, I know I read it. It's like, how much of this middle do I include? Favorite to read or watch or something. Family. That one gets me every time. Which, you know, I am lucky enough to have a very loving and wonderful like core family unit, but I'm also my sister married somebody who has a son, and so like I suddenly became an uncle to a 7-year-old, and skips the Kirby things. It's the same kid.
Gotta teach him right.
I'm trying so hard. I'm like, I think I finally convinced my sister to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender with me.
Yes.
That's the other thing I learned is when you're receiving feedback, always keep the source in mind. If someone doesn't like, some people don't like things, and that's fine. But like, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. I frequently will refer to characters who I play a redemption arc for as Zuko. So it's never been as good, but that's okay. I can't take it too seriously if someone was like, yeah, I kind of stopped that after a few episodes. I'm like, all right, like we are just very different people. We're gonna write very different things. That was awesome. Yeah, keep the source in mind for your feedback, just because not that one person is wrong or right, but like if people don't engage with the type of stuff you're writing, like factor that into your response to their feedback and what that does to your work. Yeah.
It's one last question. What are your favorite like video game stories?
Video stories. I really my favorite when people ask me my favorite video game is, I usually give either Outer Wilds or Chants of Sonar. Which is, yeah, they're sort of the narrative for Outer Wilds is like all done in like text that you sort of discover. It's space archaeology. But it's interesting because my brain wasn't really processing it at first, and then as I played it more and more, I was like, oh wow, this is a really brilliant story. And then like you're also writing a very brilliant story just while you're exploring and uncovering this other brilliant story. I like the Chants of Sonar as well, because any time that a game like really makes the other aspects resonate strongly, like Chants of Sonar does, where the aspect of like learning these languages is also kind of the story that you're telling. Or in Brothers, I'm a little biased because my old studio ported that game to mobile. They sort of gamify grief at the end, where you like stop using a certain command. I don't want to spoil it, but stop using a certain type of input, and then at a very crucial moment you start using it again. And they were tears. Let me tell you, they were tears.
What would you say is the most fun thing you have written in your career?
In video games, you're saying, or
Well, I guess in general.
yeah. Let's see. A lot of stuff that I wrote for video games is locked behind NDAs. I think I've been contributing to a horror short story anthology for the past 5 years. That's part of why I'm working on that story, is to I want to collect all of them and then publish, just the ones that are just mine, because it's a little hard to ask people to buy a book, and they're just interested in my work. That has like a bunch of other people's work in it. And there's like two that are set in the same fictional universe that I created that's sort of based on medieval and then Georgian Ireland. And being able to sort of like plant these little seeds throughout those stories and have them refer to each other in ways and also show how things change as the time goes on. That's that. I love that stuff. It's so fun for me.
Has there ever been a time where you had like a writing thing, but then it got scrapped? And have you ever had experience where you would go back to that scrapped idea?
Yeah. One of the nice things about my studio as well was that they had masterclass subscription. So I watched, Gaiman's masterclass on storytelling, and he refers to his compost file, and that was anytime like we had to cut a line that we loved, the compost file. And I've taken to using it that as well, because you might get your next story idea just like browsing through your compost file. I remember I would always just collect like random lines that like I didn't have context, I didn't have anything. I just like, that sounds fun. And that became the basis for the marks. The portfolio is work in progress, but yeah, you never know where. I am strongly against like full on throwing out anything. Because at the very least you can learn from what you've done. Even if it is bad, I've gone back over my stuff I wrote in like middle and high school, and I'm like, it's a mess. But I also can see like where I was learning things, and I was actually able to sort of draw on one of the monsters I made for the webcomic. So,
I think that's very much it. Yeah, so, thank you guys for coming.
Make sure to follow
Yeah, make sure to
Robbie
follow.
on all the
Yeah,
platforms
if you-
and
questions that you wanted to ask that we didn't get to, or if you want to continue this conversation at all, I love talking to students in particular, especially because there's probably a lot of things that you all know better than I do at this point. Because I'm sort of learning things backwards in a lot of ways.
yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Robbie. I really
It's really fun.
appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's- All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Anybody going through